Now, this is the new one that we got. This is a 5 liter. Comes with a nice little, see, I've been distilling stuff in it. We'll get more into that in a minute. So I went and bought me a, this is like for camping. And then what I did, since the other one wasn't working, what I did is I took this off. That's just how it comes off. This way, if it does overpressurize, it pops it and bleeds out rather than exploding. I went down, I measured the depth of this here, this rim. I doubled that, and the outside is a plastic. The I think the outside's a plastic. Sometimes they're aluminum, but I cut my distance here, and I took the inside stainless piece and went to my metal worker guy, friend of mine. He runs a big metal shop, and I got myself a 12 liter stainless steel pot. And the one that I got had little drippy handles. Actually, this one is from a original 12 liter distiller that I was originally doing some of my stuff in, reducing my vinegars and so on. We'll get more into that in a minute. I had him cut me a flat piece, and we bowed it slightly so that it had a slight up effect, because you don't want the water catching the rim and just dripping back down. We want it to rise up, so we want that water to rise. So it had a slight upward effect to it. We then cut a hole in the middle of the flat piece and welded this section onto it. And that was it. That's all I had to do, because now I had recycled this into this piece with the lidding. And what happens is now this just fits right onto there. And now instead of a 4 or 5 liter, I've got 12 liters. This sits on the oven, on the stove, my large burner on the stove. I slowly raise it up until I start getting a drip. Then I know my water's boiling. The next thing about this that is so neat is the power couplings. These things, excuse me, these things come with 2 connectors. One for the power for the bottom unit, and one for the power for the top unit. Okay? And what I did, the top unit has a little short plug just big enough to reach down. See, I could actually just, these things are universal. I can reach down and just plug it in. The thing is, this is a male plug. The incoming electrical plug for the bottom piece is a female plug. So these 2 plugs actually fit in. And now I've got my regular, this is a 220 because we're in Europe. I've got my regular plug that goes into the power. And so I have basically, by doing this, I have recycled around 50% of, or possibly more, because the majority of the materials is in the fan unit. What's going on here? Oh, there we go. Most of the materials is up here anyway. This is just a cylinder with a heating unit and a little counter on the bottom. So I've recycled the majority of the old one, turned it from a 5 liter to a 12 liter, and now I could set this in the morning and within a couple of hours have 12 liters of water that's usable for drinking, washing, hand washing, giving water to the animals, like the cats and so on, of course, that kind of thing. 12 liters minimum a day. The average human drinks about 2 liters a day under basic conditions, more if you're in a desert or whatever, but it's more than enough for the day. So I've got the next day's supply. The next morning when we put this into its holding container, the distilled water, we refill this, and so on day 1 I make 1 pot. That evening I make the second pot, which is what will be used on day 2, and on day 2 I'm making it the water for day 3. So we've always got our water supply. I could even do this by pulling the water and filtering, sieving it or whatever from our pond or our underground water source. We got a little aqua spring that comes out, and I could still turn it into potable water. The only other thing that I did is this unit right here, and I know it comes off. That unit comes off, and this is where you put your small active charcoal filter. Just sits in there, and as it goes through, it filters through it. What I did is I took that off, and I used a small, where you use the screwdriver, one of those metal bands, tighteners, and I attached a piece of copper to it and bent the copper out in a way so that my water unit sits in it. Boom, there you go. 12 liters from a recycled Vivor water distiller. So, sorry, a 12 liter from a 5 liter recycled Vivor distiller. Now, let's get into the more interesting stuff. Get this out of the way. So, when doing vinegar, unlike fermentation, if I was fermenting for wine or something, I'd have a bubble cap or a water valve, and this keeps oxygen from getting in. We do not want this when doing vinegar. When doing vinegar, we take our old or bad wine, we put it in. We're going to cover it with a very porous, but we want to basically keep letting stuff out, but let the air move through it. Then I just use a rubber band. This is some of that sewing elastic, and I simply just make me a there we go. This stuff is fairly porous, so I'm going to put 2 layers on it because I want to keep the dust and stuff out, but at the same time I want to let that air get in there. When yeast runs out of oxygen, it starts producing ethanol and other alcohols. And we do not want that to happen on a large scale. It will happen to some extent. You're not going to avoid it, as we'll see in a bit. But And that's it. And I'll let this sit for several weeks. And the old wine and stuff turns into new vinegar, at which point we reduce the vinegar in the distiller and continue on. Now let's see what we're going to do with the rest of our vinegar mixture. Alright, so we've taken our vinegar, we put 5 liters of vinegar in. I have this set at 108. What that's going to do is burn off any volatile or unwanted alcohols that did form while the vinegar was doing its thing. And we are removing 50% of the water in the process at the same time. So what we're doing, I know I've got 5 liters. When this hits 2.5 liters, because it's marked along here, I know that my reduction or concentration is done, and then that goes into our vinegar holding thing. So out of 10 liters of vinegar, we got about 5 liters of condensed or reduced vinegar. The other 5 liters of the water and the other byproducts is now in here. What we're going to do now is separate the volatile components, the different alcohols. The way we're going to do that, the first alcohols are our burning alcohols. The second set of alcohols is our medicinal alcohols that's used for the same as what you'd use for rubbing alcohol, sanitation and so on. So our first alcohols we're going to burn off, let me get my little cheat sheet here, is our acetone, our methanol, and our ethyl acetate. All of these burn off at around, all of them combined. They burn off at different temperatures, but combined at 77.1, this will start burning those off. So what we're going to do is we're going to heat this to 77. Let it burn off the acetone, the methanol, which burns off at 56 and 64 Celsius average. Then we're going to raise it, because I can't raise it by a half a point. These go up by 1 degree Celsius each. We're going to raise it to 78. And it's because it's already heated. As it rises up, I can watch my temperature. And in theory, we should be watching the vapor temperature, but we're not able to do that with this. So we've got to gauge it by the actual liquid temperature. Once I see my liquid temperature hitting 78, I know between the 77 or 77.1 and the 78, it's now burned off any of the ethyl acetate. Okay? At that point, we should have nothing left in here except ethanol, propanol 1 and 2, butanol, fufarol, and water. Now our butanol and fufarol will not burn off until 116 and 161 Celsius. This will not get high enough to burn that off. However, sorry, I had a thing in my lip. Once we separated the alcohols, we can then run it at 108 Celsius, burn off the water, and know that any remaining components is the unwanted butanol and fufarol. Okay? So, step 1, we have condensed our vinegar. We have saved all the water that would have been running through a conventional distiller, because it's all contained here, and we're not having to have the water in, water out, and waste all of that water. We have recovered 5 liters of water from our vinegar. Our vinegar is now in storage. And now we're going to separate the alcohols. To do that, we need to separate the acetone, methanol, and ethyl acetate. And those separate between 56.5 and 77.1. So now we're going to set this to 77. We're going to let this heat up to 77. Once it is at 77, we know we burned off the first two primary alcohols. Then we can raise it to 78 and we watch our other temperature. Once we go from 77 and our temperature reaches 78, we know we've burned off the acetone, okay, or the acetate. Once that's done, then we get to our medicinal rubbing alcohol components. So let's let this come up to temperature and be back with you in a bit.